Game director Masahiro Sakurai was pretty dissatisfied with the fighting game market. He looked around and saw that games like Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter nailed such a good formula that it was being copied by everyone, over and over and over again, and it was starting to get stale fast. So he wanted to make something that might raise some eyebrows.
Me and you and me, no matter how they toss the dice, it had to be the only one for me is you.
Just one thing I want to say. Fighting game is something so great.
If there's any esport that I would say I enjoy spectating the most, and being completely honest here, it is definitely fighting games. Competitive fighting games have been around for a really long time, and have stayed as one of the most established esports to this day. While MOBAs or strategy games may at times take the spotlight, fighting games have and always will be there, and will always have a place in my heart. Complex inputs, strategy, choosing characters, all culminating in an intense and flashy experience for all. And then there's Smash Brothers. Simplified controls, intrusive stage hazards, and dumb kiddie Nintendo characters. A party fighting game of sorts. Yet, it has as big of a competitive scene as even Tekken, Street Fighter, or Mortal Kombat, amongst others. Typically, 2 games in the series occupy spots on EVO's tournament schedule, and there's even a separate tournament each year just for Smash Brothers and all its variants within its own organization. So, how did we get here? How did this go from simplified, party-friendly fighting game made by an SNK fan to Nintendo's most successful esport franchise? Well, that's what I hope to do in Smash Bros. vs. the World, where we will look at each Smash entry one at a time, examine the production, the product, and the lasting legacy of each entry. Let's get started. HAL Laboratory was a second-party developer for Nintendo that was technically independent. 2 superstars in Nintendo came out of this company, and at one point were a pairing bringing some of the company's best published games. One of which was Masahiro Sakurai, who started as a game director for Kirby's Dream Land at just age 19. While working on this project, Sakurai was met with his boss, Satoru Iwata, a brilliant programmer hailing from Sapporo who was known for being the top of his class while studying computer science in 1978. After the next 2 games in the Kirby franchise, Iwata and Sakurai were getting ready to work on a new project that utilized the Super FX chip of the Super Nintendo, a special chip that was put into the game cartridge to help bring graphics like these to the console. When asked to move this project over to the Nintendo 64, the duo had 2 different projects to pitch. One was an action-adventure game, and the other was a 4-player fighting game focusing on wringing out opponents rather than whittling down HP. The action-adventure concept was greenlit in lieu of the unconventional fighting game concept, yet they worked on the fighting game instead. The prototype was given the production title of Ryuoh, the fighting game, named after the neighborhood that the HAL Laboratory offices were in, translating to Dragon King. Sakurai and Iwata later noted that just the 2 of them handled all aspects of the prototype besides sound, which they had one other person help with. The design of the game employed a philosophy that was common at HAL Laboratory. It was coined Kirbyism by Sakurai himself, meaning that a game should be appealing to both casual and hardcore gamers by being easy to understand and play, while the challenge being that it is difficult to master, thus simplifying many elements of fighting games in the process. Notably, instead of rapid input combinations, the control was stripped down to some basic moves and variations of those very basic inputs. But wait. So how did this unauthorized fighting game project, run by pretty much just 2 people, turn into Nintendo's only crossover franchise? Sakurai was wanting to make the game in a way that gave it a proper atmosphere for people playing the game at home. He ended up asking Shigeru Miyamoto himself for permission to use Nintendo characters such as Mario, Link, and Pikachu in the game. He was at first denied. He did it anyways in secret, and presented the game again and gained the green light to finish the game into the next year. And then finally, January 21st, 1999, the game would be released as And that's really all we know about Super Smash Brothers. Brotherses? How do I add a possessive to Super Smash Bros? Do I say Super Smash Broses? Super Smash Brotherses? This is hard. Making YouTube videos is hard. And that's really all that we know about the game's development. When I was scouring the internet for information about it, all I could really find was information about the initial project. And the rest of it was just, we made the game. And that's really all it was. The rest of the information we have to go on is sales information. Thought I would add this little note here because after looking at my script and looking at the video, this section seems severely lacking, but I have to be completely honest here. There's nothing I could really find. Initially with only a Japan release and a very limited marketing campaign in 1999, it was met with a surprising smash success. It was released worldwide to even greater success later that same year. It was even included on the Chinese iQII player in 2005, and only 14 games were allowed on there, basically cementing the game as one of the Nintendo 64's essential titles. And it was even given the accolade of the most original fighting game on the market, and possibly the best multiplayer game on any system. Its sales were also nothing to scoff at either. This game is about as common as sand from a collector's perspective just because of its total of over 4 million copies worldwide, and it even became a player's choice title in the process. To say the least, it was pretty successful. Super Smash Bros. For the Nintendo 64 is a game. It's a good game for sure, but no doubt it has its issues. Once you're hit, the hit stun is so long you're basically dead. Throws are crazy overpowered, and Z canceling is insane to the point that it cancels everything. All the stages are illegal in tournaments except Dreamland because of intrusive stage hazards and janky oversized layouts. Hugh made an excellent video showing all of the imbalances from a competitive perspective. However, it must be said this was their first go-around at this type of game, and the core design of it is really its crowning achievement. Because of this game's brilliant design, people still to this day play their choice of Super Smash Bros. Also, it was pretty set up on features for such an experimental title. A pretty good cast of fighters, fun stages, the item mechanics, and what later became a staple of the series, we'll just call Classic Mode. Classic Mode is the single-player mode for Smash. It pits you against a fixed gauntlet of fighters within the game, with a few extra fun modes mixed in. Classic Mode works for what it is. The fights are as fun as you would expect since they are the same mechanics and design as the multiplayer part of the game. Fluid, simple movements on a dynamic and varied stage, all while playing as and against some of Nintendo's most popular all-stars. The extra modes were nothing to scoff at either. Break the targets and board the platforms are brilliant ways to understand a character's moveset and movement. Both require you to master the complexities of a character's moveset in order to even finish the challenge without. Since each stage is specially designed for each character. Board the platforms is very similar to break the targets. The only difference being that board the platforms has a little bit more to do with platforming and stage movement than it does with projecting your moves in order to reach the targets. If you're planning on going into competitive Smash 64, please do, we need more 64 dudes in the scene. Figuring out a main through these two modes is an excellent start. Although I should say that a lot of these extra modes aren't the best. The Polygon Fighter Battle can be fun, but also extremely annoying if you're doing repeated playthroughs of Classic. And Race to the Finish was terrible and the weakest part of the game, honestly. It was extremely annoying to go through every single time, and since I was doing repeated playthroughs of Classic in order to get all this footage, I literally just wanted to fast forward through this part, but I was playing on original hardware, so you can't do that. Unlocking extra characters and stages can be a hassle. The challenges related to these unlocks range from practically turning on the game for the first time to straight up impossible for anyone new to Smash 64. I don't know if it's just me, but I actually had to buy a retrobit reproduction of the Hori Mini-Pad controller to properly unlock Captain Falcon in the game. The original Nintendo 64 controller hurt my hands trying to do what seemed from the outside was a simple task, beating Classic within 20 minutes. It's just not that simple, and honestly, as a Pikachu main, I found unlocking the 3 extra characters pointless. None of them really fit my playstyle at all, and I really only unlocked them so that I could sit here and criticize the game. My primary criticism of the game is that it's on the Nintendo 64. Now that sounds stupid to many of you. How can I criticize the game for what it's on as opposed to the actual design of the game? Hear me out. Smash was an exclusive to the Nintendo 64. This means that most young players, myself included back in the day, had to use the terribly designed Nintendo 64 controllers for the game. This isn't a complaint about Smash, but one about the Nintendo 64. There are a lot of great games that were soured by the design philosophy of the Nintendo 64 in general, and specifically its input hardware. Many of my favorite games from that era are just better with the Hori Mini-Pad or a comparable reproduction. This issue with the controller carries over into many's memories about the product, whether we like it or not. For example, blowing on a cartridge is just as much a part of the Nintendo experience as the design or the presentation of a Nintendo game. Speaking of experience, Smash 64 has this simple but sure as hell charming presentation to it. Somehow they managed to make all these characters look okay on the same screen. These stages were very impressive to me as a kid. The fact that the tree interacted with the fight by blowing air was, to me at the time, a really neat and fun detail. And stage hazards were cool back then, which I think was the intent. Sakurai wanted an approachable, fun fighting game, one you could pull out at parties just like you would with Mario Kart. And in many ways, he succeeded in this endeavor. Just because the game has a host of issues from a competitive perspective doesn't mean that to filthy casuals like me and my friends were back in the day, it has the same issues. Did we play newer renditions more? Sure. But there was always a beauty to going back to that much simpler, weird 3-prong controller, popping in this cartridge that had art of Mario committing animal abuse, and playing a couple matches on Hyrule Temple or Saffron City. The MIDI-based soundtrack is poignant when I'm having an especially nostalgic moment for that time in my life, where games were about fun for me. Is Super Smash Bros. For the Nintendo 64 a masterpiece that revolutionized fighting games forever? No. Is Super Smash Bros. For the Nintendo 64 even the best Super Smash Bros. Game? Oh, hell no. But what it is the start to something great. It's the start to something that a lot of people cherish, including myself. I still have my original cartridge. That's kind of rare for my collection, to be honest. There's something about this game that it's the first thing I think of when I'm pulling out the Nintendo 64. I don't know if it's the graphics or the soundtrack or the janky controls, but there's something great about it. There's something so charming about it, and that charm, that wonder, that fun is kind of what cemented it as a beloved Nintendo franchise. The legacy of Super Smash Bros. Isn't as impactful as I'd like it to be. It didn't change all games forever. Instead, it's kickstarted something that set itself in the minds of gamers everywhere. Just this simple little experimental party game project. All the hype and discussion and arguing that we have about Super Smash Bros. Nowadays, all the tournaments, the entire community, the fandom, if you will, all sprung from this Nintendo 64 game. Which is funny because it's also the most forgotten about Super Smash Bros. Game. With that, I want to encourage everyone watching to try their best to remember Super Smash Bros. For the Nintendo 64. If you've never played it before, I highly recommend you pick up a copy. Or, you could always be a pirate and pick up a ROM. I know everyone's doing that nowadays. It's totally worth a shot. Just the graphics, the sound, the gameplay, everything about it. There's just some kind of charm to it that will stick with you. And if you don't get what I'm feeling, obviously let me know in the comments. Maybe I'm just biased, maybe I'm just nostalgic, but there's something special about this game. And it's sad that it's kind of been thrown to the wayside in favor of honestly better and more well-known games in its franchise.